Get this
Nick Hume was a businessman who always tried to do the right thing, even when faced with difficulties. He lived with his wife, Helen, and their two sons, Brendan and Lucas. The brothers often argued, but they still cared deeply for each other. Overall, the Hume family was loving and supportive. After one of Brendan's hockey games, Nick drove him home because Helen and Lucas couldn't attend. During the drive, Brendan said he wanted to go to Canada to pursue a professional hockey career. Although Nick knew he would miss his son, he encouraged and supported his dream. While driving, Nick saw two cars passing by without headlights but didn't pay much attention. As he looked for the highway entrance, his car ran out of gas, so he had to stop at a nearby gas station. While Nick filled the tank, Brendan went into the store to buy snacks. Suddenly, the same two cars arrived and masked men ran into the store, demanding money. The cashier was shot when he tried to grab a gun, leaving Brendan frozen in shock. Hearing the gunfire, Nick tried to run inside, but was hit by a car. One of the robbers pulled out a machete. Encouraged by his partners, he suddenly cut Brendan's throat, leaving Nick horrified. The gang ran out of the store, leaving the attacker behind as he tried to escape. Nick tackled him to the ground and tore off his mask, revealing his face. The killer broke free, but was soon hit by a car in the middle of the road. Nick rushed to Brendan, who was bleeding badly, and shouted for help. He took his son to the hospital, where doctors immediately took Brendan into surgery, while a nurse tried to calm Nick down. Helen and Lucas rushed to the hospital after hearing about Brendan, but he soon died, leaving them heartbroken. Nick was taken for a police lineup and immediately identified the killer as Joe Darley, who was only a teenager. The family buried Brendan shortly after and struggled to move on without him, while Lucas grieved the loss of his brother. That night, Lucas went into Brendan's room and cried as he looked at a photo of them together. Meanwhile, Nick met with his lawyer and learned that the prosecutors planned to make a deal with Joe because the murder weapon had not been found. Although Noah testified, the gas station had no surveillance cameras. Nick wanted Joe to get a life sentence, but he knew that if the case went to trial, Joe might go free. The lawyers also said that Brendan's death was being treated as just another gang-related killing, which made Nick furious, as if his son's life didn't matter. During the trial, Nick looked at Joe, who started mocking him, sparking something inside Nick. To everyone's shock, Nick withdrew his testimony, saying it had been too dark to clearly see the attackers. Joe celebrated immediately. After the hearing, Nick sat silently in his car, watching Joe's friends pick him up and treat him like he had just won the lottery. Nick started following their car and finally stopped at a quiet street corner. He then went home, went into the shed, and looked for a weapon to arm himself. While he was doing this, Lucas came in to talk about Brendan. Nick quickly wrapped a knife and hid it. Later, he went back to the place where the gang had dropped Joe off. Trying to stay calm, he suddenly saw Joe step outside to take out the trash. Taking the opportunity, Nick moved toward him. Joe was shocked when he saw Nick, and as soon as he recognized him, Nick attacked. The two struggled violently. Joe grabbed Nick's knife, but Nick overpowered him. During the struggle, Joe was stabbed in the stomach and died soon after. Nick took the knife and quickly left the scene. On his way home, he wiped his fingerprints off the blade and threw it into a nearby river. When he returned, Helen was shocked to see him bruised and battered, but Nick told her he had slipped and fallen. That night, Nick broke down in the bathroom, apologizing to Helen for not being able to protect their son. Meanwhile, gang leader Billy delivered money to a crime boss named Bones before going back to his hideout, where he was told about Joe's death, leaving him furious. Billy and his men started planning revenge, trying to figure out who had killed Joe. One of them said his sister had seen a man in a suit hanging around, which made Billy believe Nick was responsible. Meanwhile, Nick was at work when a detective told him that Joe was dead. Feeling relieved, Nick left his office and headed home. But on the way, Billy and his gang appeared and began chasing him. One of the men even tried to shoot him. Nick managed to take down his attacker, but Billy and his men started shooting, forcing him to run through several alleys. The chase ended when Nick reached a multi-level parking garage, completely exhausted. He climbed the levels, setting off car alarms to distract his pursuers. On the top floor, one gangster climbed onto the roof to look for him. Hiding between cars, Nick waited for the right moment. When the man was distracted, Nick struck, disarmed him, grabbed a tire iron from a nearby car, and beat him down. The gangster quickly recovered, and they fought again, ending up inside a parked car. The car slipped into neutral and started rolling backward toward the edge of the garage. Just before it went over, Nick kicked out a window and escaped, while the gangster was trapped inside and died in the crash. Nick ran to his own car and drove away before Billy and the others could catch him. Panicked, he pulled over to catch his breath. At that moment, Helen called, saying she couldn't find Lucas, but Nick immediately knew where his son was. Nick found Lucas at the gas station where Brendan had been killed. The boy was overwhelmed with guilt and cried heavily. Nick comforted him and took him home to Helen. Meanwhile, Billy went through Nick's wallet, found family photos, and started planning his revenge. Later, while Nick was at work, Billy's henchman, Bodie, stormed into the building carrying a package. Security tried to stop him, but he got into the elevator and reached Nick's office, shouting his name. Bodie threw the package at Nick and warned that he and his family would be next before guards dragged him out. When Nick opened the package, he found his briefcase and photos of his family inside. Nick saw a phone number written on the back of the package and called it, only to hear Billy on the line. Billy warned that he would go after Nick's family and revealed that the man Nick had killed was his brother. Nick quickly gathered his things, called Helen to tell her to stay inside, and then contacted the detective to report the threat. When Nick got home, police were already outside. He rushed in and checked that all the doors and windows were locked. Soon after, the detective arrived and told Helen that Nick had started a war with Billy. Helen was shocked. Nick didn't admit it, but with the detective's help, she arranged for officers to guard their house overnight. Later, Helen confronted Nick about what he had done, but all he could think about was losing their son and his burning desire for revenge. Helen reassured Nick that he was a good father and that she would always love him. Meanwhile, Billy was woken by car horns and looked outside, seeing 2 dead police officers. Moments later, intruders burst in, chasing and shooting at him. Nick ran into the bathroom, causing one man to trip and threw another over the railing. At the same time, 2 intruders dragged Helen and Lucas down the stairs where Billy and his crew were waiting. After recovering from a fall, Nick reached the stairs just in time to see Billy shoot both Lucas and Helen before Nick himself was shot. Nick woke up in the hospital, confused, shouting for his family before collapsing again. When he woke up later, he saw the detective in the room, warning him that revenge would get him nowhere. Thinking his family was dead, Nick then learned that Lucas was still alive but in a coma. He rushed to his son's side, sat with him, and asked to spend time together. Filled with guilt, Nick apologized for always treating Lucas differently from Brendan and for not protecting him, but he told his son how much he truly meant to him. Then, when the detective returned, Nick had suddenly disappeared from the room. Nick walked home with a new, determined mindset. He called a friend to trace a phone number, then went to the bank and withdrew all his money. After finding the location, he went to a bar and took down the bartender who worked for Billy. Next, he met Billy's boss, Bones, to buy guns and showed him the cash. Bones revealed his collection of weapons, and Nick bought all of them. As Nick was leaving, Bones told him that Billy was his son, but Nick didn't care and went ahead with his plan for revenge. Back home, Nick got familiar with the weapons and shaved his head bald. He then grabbed a shotgun, went to the address of one of Billy's henchmen, fired shots inside to scare him, and forced him to reveal Billy's location. Nick forced the man to call Billy. When Billy answered, Nick executed the man. After that, Bones confronted Billy for always causing trouble and dragging him into messes. Suddenly, Billy shot Bones dead and stole his car. Nick tracked Billy to his hideout, crashed through the gate, rammed a truck, and killed the thug inside. Billy stumbled in with a shotgun, ready to fight. Nick opened fire on the armed men chasing him, shooting one of them through a window. The others kept chasing, leading to a chaotic gunfight. Billy and Body arrived to join the search inside the dark building. In the shadows, they lost track of Nick and carefully looked for him. One man almost shot Nick in the head, but Nick took him down first. He then moved into another room where Billy confronted him. They exchanged gunfire, and Nick shot off one of Billy's fingers. Body then shot Nick in the neck, but before running out of bullets, Nick killed Body with a shot to the head. Nick staggered and sat down while Billy tried to shoot him, but his gun was empty. Both collapsed on the same bench, bleeding heavily. Billy whispered that Nick had turned him into one of them. Nick pulled out his pistol and asked if Billy was ready to meet his maker, as Billy broke down in tears. Then, Nick ended his life. Nick drove Billy's car home and collapsed on the sofa as the police arrived outside. He played a video of his happy family. The detective assured him that Lucas would survive. Nick let out one final breath and died peacefully on the sofa, his eyes fixed on the image of his family.